Welcome to the MYS Virtual Hangout. Here's your host, MYS Music Director, Raul Gomez.
Good afternoon, Metropolitan Youth Symphony students and families and friends watching everywhere. I have an amazing guest this afternoon. Monica Huggett is standing by. If you were to travel back in time right now and you find me, a little 14-year-old Raul Gomez practicing violin somewhere in Costa Rica, and if you were to tell him that in 2020 he's about to interview Monica Huggett live on the internet in the middle of a pandemic, I wouldn't know what you're talking about. I wouldn't believe you. But I've been hearing Monica's recordings since I was a teenager. So for me, it's very, very exciting to talk to her this afternoon. And I'm very excited also to see a bunch of you already online and ready to ask your questions. Monica has been the artistic director of the Portland Baroque Orchestra since 1994. And if I'm not mistaken, we'll ask her about this, but she's going into her final season next year. And she has 2 gramophone awards, one for her Bach Sonatas and Partitas, which she recorded in 97, and one for her Bieber Violin Sonatas. And she's just a legend, and we're so lucky to have her here in Portland. And I believe she is just waiting for us to go to her. And let me just make sure that everything looks good here. And there you are. Monica, how are you?
I'm very well. Very, very well. I'm very happy to be here talking to you.
Well, thank you. We're all very excited. And I was just telling everybody that, when I was back in Costa Rica, where I grew up, playing violin, my youth orchestra in high school, I used to listen to your records. And, you, as it is the case with thousands of musicians, I'm sure you made a big impact. So thank you for taking the time for talking to us.
Oh, my pleasure. I'm glad I've made an impact. That's a relief. I've achieved something in my life.
And look, let's jump right into it, because one of the things that we love learning about our guests on this show is your beginnings in music. And many of our viewers are young musicians in high school or younger, and you were the 5th of 7 children. Is that right? So
yes, that's correct.
How was growing up with so many siblings, and how did you put your hands on a violin in the first place?
Well, the 4 older ones all started the piano, and I think I probably decided that I didn't really want to play the piano, because then I would be competing with these 4 older ones who were actually quite a lot older. There was a bit of a gap. And my uncle had given us a violin, and it was hanging around. And I remember quite clearly feeling sorry for this instrument, because I felt it was neglected. And I said to my parents, I want to learn the violin. We've got one, I want to learn the violin. And although they normally started music lessons at 8, I was so keen I started at 6.
So this was a musical family, it sounds like.
Yes.
Did your parents play piano or other instruments?
Well, my father played violin, actually. He used to play second violin in a dance band for fun. And my mother was very musical, but she used to sing in choirs, and my parents met in the church choir. That's how they met. But yes, I think that me and my siblings kind of lived for music. Every single one of them just adores music, I think.
And how about the 6th and 7th children? Did they also get into music?
Yeah, the 6th one had a bit of a disability, but he loves music. I mean, he's got very good taste in rock music, likes Led Zeppelin. And the youngest actually is really mad about music. Although he didn't do it professionally, he did a degree in music, and he played the French horn. But he's mad about Renaissance polyphony and singing, and he has his own choir. And he's always off on Sundays singing in choirs. and it's almost that's his raison d'etre. He likes singing. I gave him a record of. He said that when he was 14 and I was 23, that I gave him a record of the Hilliard Ensemble music from the court of Henry VIII, and that completely hooked him. And that since then he's just loved that kind of 15th, 16th, 17th century music.
And that you'll play it together growing up, you and your pianist older siblings, was there?
Yeah, sometimes, although we were very spread out. They meant to have 4, and then they had me. I was the first mistake, and then they had another mistake. So, you know, my eldest sister's 10 years older than me, and went off to university when I was 9, and my other sister had left. In fact, there's quite an interesting story about the youngest two, because the youngest was 19 years. There's 19 years between the eldest and the youngest,
okay.
And the youngest two once went to my parents and said, "Who are those 2 women who come to dinner on Sunday?" They didn't even know they were their sisters. So yeah, it was. I did play a bit with my siblings, and I remember when I was very young, dancing around the piano and putting my ear against the piano and listening to the resonance and enjoying all the music that they made. But there were a lot of gaps in age.
And were you immediately, like, could you tell as a young little girl that you were really good, that you make fast progress, that you like to practice? How was that relationship with your instrument early on?
Well, I don't know whether I like to practice, but my mother was had a certain aspect of tiger mom, and we were not very rich, and so the deal was, we pay for violin lessons, you practice every day. So my mother made me practice every day, all the time I lived at home, you know, including Christmas Day and all the way through the summer holidays. I always played every single day. And I can remember when I was very young and I went home from school for lunch, and my mother made me practice. And I remember the tears rolling down the violin because I really wanted to be out playing with the others, but she made me practice. So she had a bit of, but I think it became obvious to them and to my teacher that I was talented. I don't know whether I knew I was talented, but by the time I was 8, they said, "Oh, she's talented." And funnily enough, by the time I was 12, it was decided I was going to be a violinist. And I think that's symptomatic of coming from a big family, and it's like, well, we know what she's going to do. She's going to be a musician. Okay, tick her off. So I never had to decide. It was just decided for me. Yes.
And then you got through your teenage years. Were you playing in ensembles at all before you went to the Royal Academy of Music?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's something that the English are very keen on and good at. I mean, I played in the local youth orchestra, I played in Saturday morning school orchestra, I played in the school orchestra, I played in other school orchestras. I think it was my entire social life was playing in youth orchestras, yes. And, you know, sometimes we had wild times. I can remember after the Hounslow Youth Orchestra, we were getting older then. I mean, maybe we were 17 or 18, and we'd all pile in the car and we'd go off to the Heathrow Airport. We lived near Heathrow, London, and go to the airport bowl, and we'd play snooker, and then we'd go to the services, and we get home at 3 o'clock in the morning. I think it was my version of being wild, you know.
What's the soundtrack of those years in your head when you think back? Is there, like, in the youth orchestra, any composers or sounds that you remember?
I remember being principal second in the Firebird Suite when I was 13, and there's these bars in the Firebird Suite where there's 13 syncopated eighth notes per bar, and I think it's in two, so it says, and I remember thinking, how the hell am I supposed to be able to play this? I'm supposed to be leader of the section, and it was just like, okay, just try and make sure you get to the downbeat on the right note. But I loved playing the Firebird. I mean, I just adored that piece, and I immediately went out and bought a recording of it. And there were, I mean, I loved playing Romeo and Juliet Overture as well. Mm. But I normally played in quite small orchestras, so I did a lot of classical repertoire. You know, art symphonies. Our conductor was the second horn of the Mozart players, and I think basically all the repertoire that the Mozart players did, we did. Mm.
And did you start getting interested in Baroque music back then? Is that something that came into your radar early on, or not?
No, I didn't particularly come from an early music family. I mean, there were some early music family, but I wasn't. But the thing is that I think I got in with a crowd who were interested in non-standard repertoire. And so I was in with a crowd who played a lot of contemporary music and who were also interested in early music. And that was the case in the early days. Most of the people who played early music played contemporary music as well. That was very normal. So I was spent about 10 years playing a lot of contemporary music between 1969, 1979 or 1980. And then I really decided, I'd started playing rock violin in 1972, and I decided to go just into the Baroque because, you know, contemporary music at that time was very ideological. I don't know whether you know, but in England, really, you were not allowed to write tonal music at all. It all had to be atonal, 12-tone. And sometimes it was very, very, very complicated. And I remember one piece, I was in an ensemble called Capricorn, and we rehearsed that piece for 60 hours. And then we realized, you know, it just wasn't really, it was so complex that we had to rehearse it for such a long time. I feel that contemporary music has gone away from that now, but I mean, there's 50s, 60s, 70s, there was some very such complex music that sometimes even the musicians didn't know what was going on. So how the hell were the audience supposed to know?
And it was during these years then that you played with Christopher Hogwood. And that's, yes. Is that how you got into it?
Well, actually, the way I got into it was that when I was 17, I had very little money. That's kind of a backdrop to my entire life. You know, in 7, there was never much money, and I had very little money when I was at the conservatory. And so somebody asked me to play string quartets in a pizza restaurant. And it was one of these things where it was a whole group of people who used to play, and a lot of those people played early music. So they heard me play modern violin, and they sort of said, well, actually, she could play Baroque violin, and one of them lent me a Baroque violin. So I did a first session playing Baroque violin when I was 19. So it was very funny because it wasn't, the conservatory wasn't very tough on you to stay there all the time. It's funny because when I was teaching at Juilliard, you know, if you go to Juilliard, you belong to Juilliard and you are not allowed to do anything else. But my time at the Royal Academy, I was doing all sorts of other things. It felt like it was more of an apprenticeship. You know, you were allowed to go out and do a lot of gigs.
Yeah, well, it's the real world. I mean, so many young musicians straight out of conservatory, what, you know, the first thing they do is freelance.
Yes.
And you know, that's, I think you learn. There's a lot of learning that happens in that world of freelance, and you know, you can find your own voice, which in a way is what it sounds like happened to you. I want to ask you about getting a little bit heady here, perhaps, but just the evolution of interpretation of period of Baroque music from the 1970s until today. But before we do that, there's a game that we play here on this show, and this game is Two Truths and a Lie, and this is a way in which we get to know our guests a little bit better. So I would love to set that up so that people who are watching can vote, and then we'll get into music talk. So you sent us 3 statements, Monica Huggett, and do you have those in front of you right now, or I can just read them?
I don't have them.
So
Sorry.
I'll just read them. It's all good. So if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, as you know, your job here, you're playing detective. So your job here is to vote on the comments for the statement that you believe is a lie. And I'm going to read these statements out loud one at a time as I put them up on the screen. The first one is A. Monica played in the backing string section for the Rolling Stones song Angie. Statement B. Monica cycled from the East Coast to the West Coast. And statement C. Monica has owned 9 motorcycles. So there you have them. They're up on the screen. And go ahead and vote in the comments. And by the way, you guys, this is a great chance for you to ask questions. Ask Monica questions. Monica, we have a couple of students actually who are watching on YouTube, Naomi and Paya. And Paya saying that she's been to a bunch of your concerts and that she likes your recording of the Bach double concerto, especially the second movement.
Oh, thank you.
It's a
Thank
very
you.
specific piece of feedback here.
Yes.
Very good. So we already have a few people voting in, so let's see those votes. And while you guys vote, let's get into music here a little bit. I know we have students at the Metropolitan Youth Symphony who are interested in period performance. So you've experienced the evolution of interpretation of Baroque music since the 70s until today. So how's that process been?
Well, it's extraordinary. It's gone very quickly. I would say that in the beginning, you know, working with Chris Hogwood, his whole thing was about treating music a bit like an old master painting, and that an old master painting had been covered with many years of varnish and dirt, and so you don't see the real colors. So if you strip away the old varnish, you just let the original colors come through. And that's really what he did. I mean, we played on gut strings, and we didn't use vibrato, but there wasn't really an awful lot of interpretation. I wouldn't say that Hogwood was really an interpreter. He was a very brilliant man and a fantastic intellect. But really, I learned much more about interpretation when I went and worked in Holland with Tom Koopman. And he was so much more about communicating with the audience and getting the music off the stage and making it exciting and making it visceral. So that was when I was 28. So that was nearly 10 years later. And then everything went very fast. And sometimes I feel that it's gone to this stage where everybody has to do everything different and it's very mannered. But the fact is that we don't really know, and we never will know. But I would say that the Baroque musicians interpret a great deal now. They don't just play the notes at all. You become sensitive to the harmonies because the harmonies are very obvious. So you know when you're playing a dissonance and when you're playing a resolution, and you just tend to react to that. And you know, there's always the thing about the hierarchy of the bar, where you at the beginning of the bar generally has a bit of an accent, things like that. They become part of your DNA. And so when you work with people who are experienced, there's an awful lot they do that you don't have to worry about. You don't have to mark it in. sometimes when you work, if you work with a modern group, you have to mark everything in, and that's very tiresome. I'm afraid, but there we are. But it has evolved a lot. Have I answered your question?
Yes, yes. And I'd like to dig a little deeper here and actually kind of take a step back. And when you talk about interpretation, let's say compared to realization, for folks who might be watching, maybe parents or for students, would you explain what you mean by interpretation at the very, like superficial level? When you say to interpret music, what does that mean?
Well, it's particularly important in Baroque music because Baroque composers didn't write much in the score, almost nothing. Very few dynamics, and that's about it. And so in the early days, in the 1920s, when the Germans first started to rediscover old music, it all sounded like a sewing machine. And for many years, people thought it was, everything was exactly the same. And there was no variation. But then what happened was that people began to read treatises and realize that you would never, it's written in treatises, you would never play 4/16 notes equally. That was unheard of. You never did that. So gradually people, it's like rediscovering a language which is basically lost. And you discover a few manuscripts and somebody does some work with decoding it, and then you get a little glimpse of the language, and then gradually as you become more and more accustomed to it, it becomes natural. And that's what's happened. So although on the page there's nothing written, you realize that they did a tremendous amount with it, and that they would make a lot of nuance. They would make crescendos probably when they were going up, they made diminuendos when they were going down, they'd lean on dissonances, they would make the difference between a third and a fourth and a sixth would be more expressive. A sixth is usually more expressive, and if you were playing conjunct notes, then it's just but then if you're going da da dee da 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 da, you it's called a godjic. Everything's a godjic, which means that within the bar, you might have 1, 2, 3, 4, but you might go 1, 2, 3, 4. So the bar adds up, but within that bar, it's very flexible. It's a language, and you just learn it, and you pick it up almost by osmosis. I did a lot of listening to some of the early gurus. I mean, I think between 20 and 30, I just listened to recordings a great deal, and I learned a lot. And then I worked in Holland with Tom Koopman, and I learned an enormous amount from him. So
and what was, so you were saying that when you worked with Christopher Hogwood, there wasn't a whole lot of interpretation, but when you went to Holland, there was more interpretation. Does that mean that with Hogwood, it was a more intellectual approach, and then in Holland, it was perhaps more emotional, or how do those compare?
Well, I was talking to Matthew White up in Vancouver this morning, and what I said to him was that I used to do a lot of the recording sessions for Hogwood because he had a huge contract with Decca, and it was very lucrative. It was extremely lucrative. It was a lot of money, and he started doing all the Mozart symphonies, and he had some very good players, and the results were pretty good. But I remember he's constantly asking us not to be so expressive, constantly. And I remember once doing a whole 3-hour session of air bowing. I didn't actually touch the string. And then afterwards I said, I just got paid £40 for contributing nothing. But I was so frustrated, and I used to get so depressed about it. I would take a week or two to recover from the depression of playing this gorgeous music and not being allowed to be expressive. So, and then I went to Holland, and it was all about being expressive and being, maybe allowing your character out, but not in a way that your character would dominate the music, but allowing yourself to be excited. I always liked rock music. I loved Eric Clapton. And I always felt like, why don't I get so excited about Baroque music? Am I in the wrong profession? You know, why am I doing this? And I get so much more excited listening to the Cream or something. And then when I started working with Ton, I got really excited on stage, and I felt that the audience got excited, and I could feel that excitement. And I thought, yes, okay, this is fine. I can do this.
Yeah. And I think that's something that it's when someone goes to a Portland Baroque Orchestra performance, I think the music that you guys play and the way you perform it has certainly, you know, great emotional impact on audiences. And I think that's, I mean, you're taking the music from the page and you're, you know, creating with it. Beyond, you know, reading what's on the page, you're bringing it to life. And I think that's, I mean, that's one of my favorite things about, you know, Baroque music and the way that you guys perform it, and this approach that doesn't deny this music to have that big emotional impact.
Yes. I mean, they were, okay, they had a different culture, but we were humans. We were all humans, and we all have those feelings of joy, of laughter, and of incredible sadness, despair, hope, you know, and in each age we expressed them, and it expressed it in the music.
Yeah. And Monica, you were kind enough to offer a short performance for us. So would it be okay if we transition into that?
Yes, I'll do my best.
And will you introduce it, please? And whenever you're ready.
So this is what's called they all threw away their vials. The other thing to remember is that he played on what's called the short rib, and I can't possibly demonstrate it. It's impossible for me with my physique, but he played way down. Adam Lamotte could do it. He's got long arms. But I play in a normal position. But if you think about how virtuoso it would be to play this piece on your arm. Trouble with Baroque violins is they go out of tune easily. We play a half step down. So for your guys with perfect pitch, don't panic. And I'm using for this actually a really tiny little bow. I don't know if you can see. It's actually a lovely, elegant, kind of mid 17th century style bow. So,
yes.
So John, come kiss me now.
Brava! All right, everybody, put your hands together for Monica Huggett. And we now in the era of COVID-19, we applaud with emojis on the comments. So thank you, Monica. That was really fun. So can we talk about your instrument and your bow?
Yes.
So will you
Well,
show to the camera your violin if you don't mind and your bow, and let's learn
okay.
about your instrument.
I've got quite a few stories. I mean, it's very funny because I saw your program with Kenji Bunch,
Yes.
and he's played the same viola all his life, basically. I have had so many different instruments, it's unbelievable. I was sort of always trying to find the ideal one. And actually this, funnily enough, is an instrument from Adam Lamotte, and it's one of his Chinese smaller martyrs, and it's one of the best instruments I've ever played in my entire life. It's just a fabulous little instrument. Oh dear,
Oh, there you are.
Yeah, my iPad is playing up. I hope it's going to be okay until the end. I've got 8% left.
Oh,
anyway,
that's exciting.
Adam Lamotte. And it's one of his Chinese smaller martyrs, and it's one of the best instruments I've ever played in my entire life.
Really?
It's just a fabulous instrument.
Okay, so something interesting is happening here all of a sudden.
Yeah.
I think we're getting Zoom bombed. Hold on, let me figure this out. Who's this?
I'm scratching my head here. I'm scratching my head.
This is not Monica Huggett. What's happening?
Oh no! Oh no!
It's an imposter.
It's the Hanukkah Mugget. It's an evil twin sister. All the way from Leicestershire.
Oh boy. Okay, so I think Monica, you said the name Adam Lamotte and you conjured him into the call.
It's a bloody miracle.
It's so typical. Adam is a prankster.
I've got my wee fiddle with me. Tenths and twelfths and 14ths. It's amazing. This time.
Wow. So it's I've heard of Zoom bombing, and it never happened to me before. This is a first for the MYS virtual hangouts.
Well, that guy is a very clever prankster. He knows about computers, and he's kind of as wicked as they come. Adam Lamotte is wicked as they come.
And it wasn't even my idea. I swear, it was his.
Well, okay, so let me explain what's happening here for our viewers. So we just got Zoom bombed by Adam Lamotte, who now he's blaming me for this ordeal, but that's okay. Adam Lamotte is the conductor of the Metropolitan Youth Symphony Baroque strings, and he's also a member of the Portland Baroque Opera. My question for you, Adam, is how'd you get that wig?
Janet and I were in Eugene for the Bach Festival a couple of summers ago, and we went into Hiron's, which is a pharmacy, but kind of a fun store as well. They've got gag stuff and all sorts of toys. So I just went crazy. I had no idea. Kind of like an old novelty shop. And I saw their wigs and it was like, oh, that's fun. And then I saw the wig of all wigs and it's like, bingo, nailed it. So I bought them all out. They had 4 or 5. And then I went to the other Hirons on the other side of Eugene and bought another 5 or 6. So we could all, in Portland Baroque, pay homage to the great Huggett. I couldn't help it. I mean, I had no choice. It's one of those things.
And Adam, can you hang out for a little while? Can you stay?
Sure.
Cool. So, Monica, with Adam here now, let's talk about your band here in town, in Portland, the Portland Baroque Orchestra. You started in '94, I understand.
Yes, and it was really a sort of semi-pro community orchestra. And I came an awful long way to do that job, but it was a great opportunity for me to direct my own orchestra. So I commuted from England for 18 years.
Wow. Okay.
Yes. And, you know, gradually over the years, it grew in stature. And I think that's quite a lot to do with me pushing to get it to a higher standard. And I met Adam a very long time ago. Adam, how long ago was it? You played the Mendelssohn Concerto to me, and it was so damn good. I was so impressed. You had a lot of long, luscious hair in those days.
What happened? Where? Oh, yeah, that was probably in '98, I think. In '97, I was finishing school in New York, and I knew that I wanted to move out to Portland, partly because I was into period playing at the time, and I knew they had a wonderful orchestra there with the wonderful Monica Huggett, who I grew up listening to her CDs. So there it was. That kind of made the decision for me. And Portland's such a cool place, and it just had, even in the '90s, had a great reputation as a fun, artsy kind of place. And so I timed my visit with a PBO concert. It was actually when you were playing Symphony Concertone and the Concertante with Pablo, I think it was. And yeah, out at Merrillhurst, and that was in April of '97. And that's officially when we first met. I went backstage and, "Hi, I'm Adam," you know, I don't remember, but you looked a little startled. And then, yeah, that was part of the reason that I moved there. And then just a matter of waiting around and playing for some people, and playing for Monica and inviting her to, I think that was a master class of sorts that I played for you at University of Portland, I think it was, in Mendelssohn Concerto. So yeah, the rest is history.
Did Monica ask you to cut your hair?
Never. No, she would never do such. Never. No, that was a decision based on the natural tendency of Lamottes and their hairlines. So that was not going to be a good look.
No, Monica, so next season will be your finale season, your last season with PBO. Is that right?
Yes.
Is it all planned out? What do we have to look forward to next year?
Well, it's all planned out, but you know, who knows? Do you know if you're going to do your concerts or not? How likely is it that you're going to do your concerts?
Right, at this point, we don't know, right? We're all just sort of waiting and crossing our fingers.
Well, if the concerts happen, I'll be playing the Sinfonia Concertante with Adam in my final, because I love playing the Sinfonia Concertante with him, and he's a very good violinist, but he's a bloody good viola player too. So that's one of the things I want to do in my final concerts. We are going to do the Goldberg variations, but we also have a completely alternative plan of doing. If we can't have an audience, we will do chamber videos.
Yes.
So there's going to be basically 2 alternative seasons, because it depends who you talk to, but you know, some people don't think that we're going to be allowed to have more than 20 people or 50 people in a room. You're beginning to look a little cast down, Raoul, now.
Well, you know, it's we, like everybody else, you know, we're just trying to be creative and find out of the box options and ideas to keep audiences, and in our case, young musicians and students engaged. And
yes.
We're all sort of making it up as we go, right? And,
yes.
and just crossing our fingers.
Yes. Well, you know, if the season does go ahead, we'll start with the Goldberg variations with string orchestra, which is wonderful. I mean, I honestly think the Goldberg variations with orchestra is, I'm sorry, it's better than the harpsichord. It's so great on strings. And there's so little by Bach for just strings. There's hardly anything, you know, Brandenburg 3, and you can do the third suite with just 4-part strings. But otherwise, there's always something else. You need a singer or a trumpet or an oboe or something. But you know, the Goldberg variations, they're just a string orchestra, and they're glorious. They're glorious songs.
well, we'll cross our fingers and hope that we will have those concerts in a venue with people. For the time being, though, and while Adam is still here, I think we should go back to your two truths and a lie, Monica, because people have voted in the comments, and now we have a live voter here, though Adam might know the answer because he knows you well. But let's go back to that screen. Okay, so for those of you who joined recently, there are 3 statements on the screen. One of them is a lie. And your job here, if you're watching, is to figure out which of these statements is a lie, and you're going to vote on the comments for the lie. And let me read those statements out loud because, Adam, you might not know them yet. Statement A, Monica played in the backing string section for the Rolling Stones song Angie. Statement B, Monica cycled from the East Coast to the West Coast. Statement C, Monica has owned 9 motorcycles. So, and if I take a quick look at the votes here, Monica, I see a few B's and I see a few C's. So it looks like everybody believes that statement A is true, that you played in that song. So why don't we go ahead and reveal your first truth, Monica? Which of these is true? One of them.
Well, I was when I was a student, the second horn in the first orchestra at the Royal Academy of Music was a session fixer and probably a drug dealer. I think he was probably both. Anyway, but he fixed sessions, and he fixed a session for Angie. So I was 19 years old, and there I was going off to Island Studios in North Kensington and playing on the backing for Angie, and it was such a thrill, I can't tell you.
Very cool. Did you do more of those?
Oh, I did a lot of sessions, not for anybody as famous as that, but I did do a lot of sessions. But then, you know, they used to talk about Studio Town in those days. And the thing was that everybody smoked, and they'd stay in the studio all day, and they just turn yellow, and they lose interest in music completely because all they'd ever do is playing these long notes. And so I decided I didn't want to get Studio Town. So I stopped.
Adam, Lamar, do you know which one of the 2 remaining statements is a lie?
Yeah, well, actually, neither of them are complete lies because she has owned motorcycles. I think the lie is the number of motorcycles. I don't think that she's owned 9, but she did ride her bicycle across the country. No,
this is a bit of a trick. This was a bit of a trick question. I meant to ride all the way across, but I couldn't manage it.
I know you didn't quite, you hopped.
Yes.
Across the country. Yeah. Okay, so you did have 9. I thought it was more 7 or 8 or something, but okay. All right, so I would have guessed.
No, I had all sorts of weird motorbikes. There was one that was, I was so afraid of my father's reaction that I hid it around the back of the house because he never went down there. And then one morning he went down there and he came in and said, "Whose motorbike is that? Get rid of it."
So this is something you've been interested in for a long time.
I went motorcycle mad when I was young. I think it was the result of an unhappy love affair.
Oh.
I think I just completely freaked out, and then I became obsessed with motorcycles. And so I've had 2 Hondas, 2 Ducatis, 2 Triumphs, a Marini, a Velocette, and a BSA.
And how about now? How many do you have? Several right now, or
well,
any?
you know, my eyesight wasn't so bad. I would have bought myself a Ducati Twin, but I have this macular degeneration, which is a complete drag, and in fact I have to play from a screen so that I can read the music. So I daren't get on a motorbike. I just daren't, and I'm very sad about that because I do love them. I actually love them. Yes, I love them.
I'll get one and you can ride on the back.
Yes.
There you go.
Old ones, old motorbikes. Yes.
And what about this coast to coast ride? So it did sort of happen or didn't happen or what?
Well, it was when I was 50, I decided to give myself a birthday present of a break. And I planned to ride across the country, and everybody said I was completely crazy and that I would pass out from altitude sickness and all sorts of things. Everybody said it was going to be terrible. But what I did is I bought a recumbent bike in Boston, and I cycled to Worcester, where I got caught in the most horrendous storm. I was completely soaked. I think I sort of fell off the bike, and it was in the middle of a hill, and it was 90 degrees. And you cannot start a recumbent bike going uphill. It's impossible. So I think I pushed it to the top of the hill. Anyway, a friend of the bike shop guy, took me to Cooperstown, and then I rode down to the Erie Canal, and I went all the way along the Erie Canal to Erie, which was wonderful actually, because I didn't really want to ride on roads. And it was wonderful riding along the towpath. But then I had to come back to Portland and start the season. So I flew back to Portland. I left my bike in the Apollo's Fire Orchestra office in Cleveland. And then after I'd opened the season, I took a normal bike by Amtrak to Whitefish, and I cycled down from Whitefish to a Flathead Lake and Plains, and then up to Sandpoint, Idaho, which was wonderful too. But you see, I only did about 800 or 900 miles. I didn't manage the whole country because I wasn't a trained, fit cyclist. You know, I sort of had to, on the recumbent, I was doing about 40 miles a day, but that wasn't on a proper road, that was along a towpath. And then in Montana, I was doing 25 miles a day because it's jolly hilly. And I have a really interesting story. Do you like stories?
We love stories.
Because I was riding along Flathead Lake, and it was getting to be dark, and this was actually the beginning of October. It was getting cold, and I'd phoned up the Lake Mary Ronan Lodge so that I could stay there. And I said to the woman, "Is it uphill or downhill from the lake?" Because I was getting tired. And she was an Irish woman. She said, "Oh, to be sure, it's downhill all the way." I can't really do the accent. Adam's much better at accents. Anyway, I got a mile along this road, and I was ready to fall off the bike and roll into a ditch. And I stopped, and there was this sweet guy in his pickup truck. And I said, "Is it uphill all the way to the Lake Mary Ronan Lodge?" He said, "Oh, yes, it's 5 miles uphill."
Uh-oh.
But then he realized that I had no idea what I was going to do. So he put my bike in his truck and took me up to the lodge. And actually, he introduced me to the person that we started the Montana Festival with. And now Adam is the director of the Montana Festival. And that was all through that bicycle ride.
Wow, very nice. And so before we let Adam go, Adam, I just want to ask you about your experience playing with PBO and Monica over the last however many years. What makes PBO unique, and what are you passionate about PBO?
Yeah, it's been 20 years. And as I said before, PBO was a big part of the reason that I chose Portland as a place to land after I graduated. There's nothing like it around. There are a few Baroque orchestras on the West Coast, but Portland Baroque was, founded by just lovers of Baroque music, and just by a few local Portland players. And just to come in kind of in the middle of that is kind of astounding, because, when I came in, a lot of the original founders of the orchestra were still playing and enjoying playing with the orchestra. And then to see it grow from what they started, this little seed, a little idea of theirs, to a professional, very successful organization that's done recordings and been very celebrated in the community. And it is incredible. It's truly amazing. And and they're always just a great time to rehearse. And Monica knows, if anybody does it, I really don't like to rehearse very much, but I love to perform, but rehearsing is a little arduous for me. But even rehearsing with Portland Baroque, it's fun because it's a group of really fun, great musicians, and we are truly like a family. So it's been an honor.
Do you have anything to add to that, Monica, or any reactions?
Adam's been a huge asset in so many ways. He's always the last person to get into the room for rehearsal, but he always manages to get in about 30 seconds before the down, you know.
It's an art.
Yeah. You know, I adore Adam, but he's a slippery salmon and he's a prankster. Yes, he really is. But he's worth his weight in gold, actually. So.
Nice.
Well, Adam, thank you for Zoom bombing this Hangout. Can we see the wig again? Do you still have it there?
Anytime at all.
It's my honor. Thank you very much. Do you ever switch it on? Do you ever switch it on?
Switch it on. Well, thank you, Adam, for joining. And Monica, before we let you go, there are just a couple of more things that we'll do with you. And one of them is a segment that we call Sound Advice. And let me just adjust something on my end here real quick so that we don't see two of me, but we see one of you and one of me. Okay, so our segment Sound Advice, Monica, my prompt to you is this. If you could travel back in time and find a teenage Monica Huggett somewhere practicing or doing whatever, what advice would you have for her that we could in turn give to our young musicians?
Well, it's not going to be something incredibly inspiring. It's something it's rather prosaic, but I think it's worth saying, but they probably won't take any notice of anything I say. But I have kind of not particularly ideal violin hands because I have a very short first and a short fourth. Having a short fourth finger is quite normal, but having such a short first finger isn't. So playing thirds is actually really hard for me. But I ended up, from when I was a tiny child, I ended up playing very far out. I don't know if you can see. I had my thumb way underneath.
Sure.
Because that was the way that I could do the tenths, and that was the way I could play thirds if I was way out. And actually, it was remarked on when I was 19 by Menuhin, who I did a masterclass with. He thought that my hand position was a bit suspect. And what happened was that in my late 30s, I got the most incredible tendonitis.
Oh, okay.
Unbelievable. And couldn't really play for a year and a half, and had to completely relearn and had to learn with my thumb up. You know, this kind of Russian, Hungarian. I studied with a woman called Kato Havas. Have you ever heard of her? A Hungarian sort of demagogue. No, that's the wrong word. Pedagogue, sorry, not demagogue. Pedagogue. But she helped me to completely change my technique and to hold the violin up. And all the good violinists I know seem to have a crisis with their bodies, and at some stage have to really relearn or change things. And what I would say to your young players is, when you're young, your body's very flexible and you can punish it. You can do things wrong and it will forgive you. But later on, it doesn't forgive you. So if you're really serious about doing this as a profession, pay attention. Don't play through the pain. That's not a good idea. Figure out what your body is telling you. Everybody's hand is different. Everybody's arms are different. Everything's different. You know, it's not one size fits all.
Yes.
I've only got 5% left. It's getting low now.
Well, and we're out of time actually. So thank you for that advice. And just before we let you go, is there anything that you would like to plug or tell people online to any online performances, any resources or anything you want to bring attention to?
Well, I think, I don't know whether I have. I mean, I think I want to bring attention to the fact that it's very hard being an artist, a musician in this situation, in this country. It's really, really hard. And just, we have to not lose faith and just keep plugging on, keep trucking. Yes.
Well,
okay.
Monica, thank you so much for being so generous with your time and with your music and your advice and stories. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And I think I speak on behalf of the entire Metropolitan Youth Symphony community when I say thank you. And we all look forward to an in-person, on-stage with audience season for PBO, so we can enjoy your music making as we always do. So thank you so much, Monica.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
And thank you all for watching. Monica Huggett, you guys, is just amazing. And thank you, Adam Lamont, for that surprise visit, the first ever MYS virtual hangout Zoom bomb. And we might have more of those. Turns out that I was finally able to make Zoom work with my streaming interface. I was using Skype, which had some limitations, but now Zoom works. So we're looking into maybe having a few hangouts with more than one guest at a time. For the time being, though, we're switching to Tuesdays and Thursdays, still at 4 p.m. Pacific. Our next guest on Thursday, May 21st, is Anthea Creston, a violinist who's played all over the world with orchestras, including the Berlin Philharmonic and many chamber music groups, including the Artemis Quartet. She's going to be joining us on Thursday. And then next week, Tuesday, Ron Blessinger from 45th Parallel Universe is going to be our guest, Tuesday, May 26th, 4 p.m. And then, you guys, mark your calendars, please. Saturday, May 30th, 7 p.m. Pacific. A big online event, the MYS season finale concert. It's going to be a live stream. I'm going to be hosting. We're going to have appearances by guests, and each MYS ensemble, and we have 14 of them, is going to present a virtual remote performance. All students recorded at home their videos. We're putting everything together to create 14 performances, and it's gonna be really cool. I'm very excited, just working on the video editing right now. It's gonna be really fun. So I hope to see all of you there Saturday, May 30th, 7 p.m. There's a Facebook event. Maybe go there or put something on your calendar. And then we take a little bit of a break, and our following guest after that is on Thursday, June 4th. And this will be Rachel Sokolow. Rachel used to work for Schirmer, and she was in the music publishing industry, and now she's an artist manager and booking agent for MKI artists. And it's going to be really cool for all of us and all of you young musicians to learn from somebody who is on that side of the music business. So I look forward to talking to her. And thank you again to Monica Huggett. Thank you, all of you, for watching. And I will see you on Thursday at 4 p.m. Take care.